Wakey, wakey, cricket fans.
Just scratch yourself, wake up, is it really happening?
As the sun comes up,
he was waiting for it.
England's epic white ball series in New Zealand is going down.
Oh, he's bowling!
3 T20s and 3 crucial ODIs.
What a catch!
It starts early, but using key moments on Discovery Plus lets you catch up on the action.
Could that be the spark they needed?
New Zealand versus England, live on TNT Sports and Discovery Plus.
Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And I'm Simon Mann.
And we're looking ahead to the white ball matches in New Zealand for England in the next couple of weeks. Our coverage of this series, New Zealand against England white ball series, is sponsored by TNT, who of course have got exclusive live coverage of all the white ball matches England are playing, both the T20s and ODIs. You can get to those matches if you go to TNT Sports, stream every T20 and ODI match live on Discovery Plus, or you can also watch TNT Sports on EE, Sky and Virgin Media as well. Subscription required, 18 plus, and of course terms and conditions apply. So thank you to TNT for supporting this podcast series on both the England and New Zealand ODIs and T20s, and also actually the Ashes are coming up after that. And I suppose, Simon, in a way, although England are trying to kind of prepare for the T20 World Cup, which is in January and February in Sri Lanka and India, at the same time, this series is really a sort of precursor, an aperitif to the Ashes as well, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it fulfills two purposes, doesn't it? Those two purposes. England are building towards the T20 World Cup, so you need to play some T20 matches, and New Zealand are strong opposition, although they've got a few players missing. And, of course, England are using it to some extent as well to give their players some cricket before the Ashes. It's a good time as well for the UK audience who might be thinking about watching it on TNT. It's 7:15 it starts on a Saturday morning, so absolutely sort of perfect time for UK audiences, really, as they drag themselves out of bed on a Saturday morning and through the series as well. So the day-night aspect of it for the one-dayers plays nicely into breakfast time for UK audiences. Yeah, so look, not everyone's there from the Ashes squad, but the players that are there obviously have got things to focus on, i.e. the T20 World Cup, but there's also some players going out there to just be in New Zealand and get some cricket. I mean, Gus Atkinson, for example, he might well be there already. Is due in New Zealand to do some Ashes prep, do some bowling, and a couple of the other bowlers as well, Mark Wood and Josh Chung, are on their way to New Zealand, even though they're not part of the white ball team, just to get some overs into their body, really, in preparation in the nets, if you like, or middle practice. So, you just sense that everything is building up to the 21st of November, although there is this subplot of it being important, especially the T20s, not so much perhaps the one-dayers, although that will give some players some ability to get some match practice. For example, so just to dot the I's across the T's, Brooke, Crawley, Bethel and Carse of the Ashes squad are in the T20 squad, and then Brooke, Duckett, Root, Bethel, Carse and Archer in the one-dayers. So the one-dayers will have a bit of piquancy as well because of the Ashes just around the corner, and just about half the side there, potential side, are in the Ashes squad.
Referencing those bowlers, actually, did you notice also that Tim Southey, who was the bowling coach during the summer for England and who wasn't retained initially, has been retained now? Of course, he's in New Zealand anyway because he's a Kiwi, so he's there with the England side in these T20s and ODIs. But apparently he's going on to Perth as well afterwards to work with the bowlers in preparation for the first test of the Ashes as well. So actually, I think that's quite good, because I was a bit worried actually when I heard that Southey wasn't being retained, maybe because he just wasn't available for the Ashes, because I think he's done some good work actually. I mean, he's such a kind of clever bowler anyway, or was, and just knows the game so well. It's a bit like having Jimmy Anderson or someone in your camp, isn't it? So I'm glad to hear that he's continued to work with England's bowlers. I mean, several of them said how helpful he's been over the period. Actually, Stokes, he worked with Stokes quite a bit. Stokes suddenly produced those amazing spells in the summer. So good to see. No Ben Stokes, of course, in these T20s or ODIs. By the way, we'll also, in the second half of this show, we'll look back at our last programme, which, of course, if you heard it or watched it, was looking at England's greatest ever Test cricketers, and we had our own views on it, and we also used ChatGPT as well to assess who were England's greatest Test cricketers. And we've had some quite nice comments on YouTube, actually, as a result of that show. So we'll review your comments after the break. But actually, just to talk about New Zealand a bit, I mean, you've toured New Zealand. I've played in New Zealand a number of times. It's a brilliant place to go and play cricket, isn't it? Because it's so beautiful. I mean, it's a bit early season, I have to say. I don't even think the New Zealand domestic season has started yet. So it's going to be a bit like tonight when they're playing, or tomorrow night rather, when they're playing nighttime New Zealand time. You know, it's going to be like playing in Durham, basically, in April, which was decidedly parky. You might need the old mittens on, I reckon, on the boundary, well, if you're allowed to wear them. But it's just such a gorgeous place to play cricket, isn't it? Even though it will be a bit chilly.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about chilly. I mean, it's quite a chilled place, New Zealand. I just that feeling there. It's so relaxed when you go there. I think it's the most beautiful country that I've gone with England and toured. So it's a lovely place. You get that intensity in India. You feel when you're in India, you feel that everyone is watching the cricket. That it is the most important thing on when you're there. When you're in New Zealand, you almost feel as if, is there cricket being played? Is there a test match? Is there a one-day international? But then people turn up, don't they? I mean, the Hagley Oval in Christchurch is a lovely place to go and watch. It's in a park. They put the floodlights on there, and now so they can play nighttime white ball cricket. So it doesn't kind of have that intensity of playing Australia or playing in India. But New Zealand are extremely competitive, aren't they? They have been for a long time, especially in white ball, but they've also been a red ball test champions as well. They've got a few injury problems for this series, a few players missing, although they've got their captain back. So there's no Finn Allen, there's no Glenn Phillips, there's no Will O'Rourke, there's no Kane Williamson, Ben Sears is out, Lockie Ferguson is out, but they'll still be very competitive. So it's a good test, and they'll have their eyes on the T20 in India and Sri Lanka as well. I mean, you mentioned the weather. I mean, it's nighttime. I mean, I think in the daytime in Christchurch, it's not too bad. I had a look at the temperature. It's around about, for the first game in the daytime, it's going to be about 22, which is not bad if you're playing in the day. But they're not playing in the daytime, so the temperatures should be dipping a bit. So, yeah, it'll be a bit like playing. I mean, the England players will be very used to it. But not in that sense, not great preparation for a World Cup in Sri Lanka and India.
No, well, or the Ashes either.
No.
Because, obviously in Perth, it could be about 40 degrees. It could be, although I think mid-November doesn't really get up to that much. But England have been in Queenstown, actually, preparing for this series. I presume you've been to Queenstown. I mean, it's the sort of adventure capital of the world. Have you done a bungee jump? I have.
No.
Shot over a river. Brilliant. I mean, it's just... Maybe I need a lot to explain after that, because I did have the wet entry.
Well, you dipped your head in, did you?
Yeah, dip your head in. Yeah, they time it so that you can either have a dry or wet entry, and if you say the wet entry, they just dip your head in the water just about sort of a couple of inches. It's amazingly precise, actually, on this jumping off this kind of gorge. So yeah, pretty scary.
You're more likely to get me eating dog food than do a bungee jump.
Okay. Well, it's just worth kind of trying these things, and there's so much else to do, actually. I spent a long time in Queenstown climbing and, walks and whitewater rafting, and it's brilliant. England have only been playing golf, though, which is a relief to hear.
Yeah, Harry Brook was asked about that, wasn't he? He said, yeah, I've just been playing golf. Whitewater rafting, I do that. I did that in Zimbabwe, but I don't like heights. But the bungee jumping, I can barely think of many things I'd least like to do than do a bungee jump.
Is it also a challenging place as a commentator, because you've got all these names these days that catch you out, don't they? Because they're spelt with a W and they're pronounced with an F. They're Maori names like Whangarei and Whakatane and places like that. Have you ever found that challenging?
I haven't been to Whakatane. I think I probably would find it challenging if I had to pronounce that, but I have been to Whangarei. No, a beautiful place north of Auckland. Well, most of the places in New Zealand are absolutely beautiful. I've not been to Queenstown, but I've been to most of the other places. It's an absolutely stunning country. There's barely a sort of hideous bit of it from what I can see. But serious matters. What's interesting, I think, is that although there is focus, and Harry Brook says we're just focusing on the T20s and we're not talking about the Ashes. Inevitably, it's bubbling up, isn't it? Behind the scenes, inevitably, because you've just got to put a microphone in front of an ex-player, a notorious ex-player as well, David Warner, for example, or Both or Stuart Broad, and they come up with a comment, and then it's amplified. by social media, inevitably. We should just have a look at some of them and actually perhaps just look at some of the Ashes stories that are bubbling underneath the surface. I mean, the main one, of course, is something we flagged up a few weeks back and was inevitably going to be one of the major talking points going into the series is Pat Cummins' fitness situation. Well, almost certainly, I'd say, reading the comments from Cummins himself and Andrew McDonald and the Australian media, almost certainly he's not going to play in the first test. They hope he's going to be available for some of it. But they've got some other issues as well, because news this morning that Cam Green has pulled out of the one-day series with some side soreness. He did bowl in a Sheffield Shield game. He bowled 4 overs in a Shield game as he returns to bowling. So he's been pulled out. So he's hoping he's going to play in a Shield game late October. That doesn't give him much time to get ready to bowl, doesn't it? And to get your body sort of bowling ready for a test series.
And he's had problems with that before, hasn't he? I mean, he's had problems with his bowling injuries before. By the way, you're referring to the one-day series. That's Australia-India, isn't it? Australia-India are playing a one-day series, and he's not now part of that. I mean, the Cummins situation is just, as we said, we had Brett Lee on, didn't we, talking about it as well, who said basically, yeah, I'm worried. This was a month ago. And sure enough, his worries have been proved correct. You get these kind of nagging injuries, they take a long time to shift, and you don't want to exacerbate them. And Brett Lee rightly said at the time, if they played Cummins in the first test, and it all goes horribly wrong, and he wrenches something badly, he's out for the series. So it's quite a tricky one to manage that. Interestingly, with all these news stories about various injuries and so on, the Betfair odds, and Betfair are supporting our Ashes coverage, of course, the Betfair odds have sort of shifted slightly. They were around about England 27, Australia sort of 65, but now they've gone to England 34% chance of winning the Ashes, Australia 57. So Australia come back, England have shifted up a bit, the draw's still 10, drawn series still 10%. So, it's just sort of shifting slightly. Good news from the England camp might sort of move that even more.
Yeah, there's some good news for Australia as well. The Marnus Labuschagne is back in form. So he's made 400s and he's been recalled to the one-day squad for the series against India. So 2 white ball 100s, 2 Sheffield Shield 100s. The other's just gone on the bowling side of it, though. So we've got Green, who's not really been bowling very much and now got a slight problem. We've got Cummins, who's got a potentially serious problem. And Beau Webster's missed the first 2 Sheffield Shield games as well. So he was in the Australian test side. He kind of gives them some balance, especially if Green can't bowl. He's missed the first 2 games of the Shield with an ankle injury, so he hasn't been bowling very much either. So their stocks might get a bit thin, and if there is no Cummins, that would put a lot on Stark and Hazlewood. And Hazlewood only played 1 game in the last Ashes series. Look, one thing to say is that in that last Ashes series, for example, Hazlewood only played 1 test match, and Australia still hammered England. And actually at Adelaide, they had no Cummins and they had no Hazlewood, and they still won comfortably. So, they'll find some bowlers from somewhere. I see Fergus O'Neill's been taking wickets in the Shield. Peter Moore's,
don't you? Yeah.
Well, Peter said it. Peter Moore said it in our interview a couple of weeks ago. So he's a very good bowler for English conditions. But I just wonder whether, just looking at, just reading the rules and seeing some of the pitches that Australia have been playing on, I wonder whether he's a good bowler in Australian conditions as well, because their pitches seem to have a bit more in them. So he's someone to keep an eye on. I asked Peter whether he was a sort of kind of like a bolter for the Ashes. Oh, well, who knows? I mean, we might see him there. He's not express pace. He's steady. And he's obviously a really enthusiastic and, yes, a good young bowler, and he can bat a bit as well. He's not the worst. Scott Boland, is there with this amazing record that he's got in Test cricket from a relatively short sample size, but he bowls very well in Australian conditions. He's picked up another fifer in the Shield, albeit on a pitch that looks that had a bit in it. So, I mean, there's lots of stories, lots of injury stories bubbling. And, of course, what we haven't had yet is the fitness test for England's bowlers. I mean, there's a lot of question marks there. So how's that going to work out? It's already well focusing Australia. What about England? Who's going to turn up fit for the first test for them? We've got injury issues over Mark Wood, Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer's had his problems, Bryden Cast has had his toe problems, and Gus Atkinson had a hamstring. So there are lots of issues for England to sort out.
But bowling's hard work, bowling's hard yakka, isn't it? There's always things that go wrong. I like Ian Botham's been on, as you mentioned, he's been on the airwaves ranting about England's poor preparation, doesn't he? Which I think he's got a point, to be honest. I mean, he says that it's not good enough to have just a game against the Lions before the first test in Perth, and that you need a proper preparation. You need to practice on those bouncier pitches. Of course, it's ironic in a way that comes from Beefy when the England 86-7 tour, when they won the Ashes, their preparation was pitiful. They went up country, and I remember Beefy actually went out to bat in an up country game and forgot his bat as he walked out to bat because they'd had a bit of a night the night before. I think, Lammy's been on a couple of podcasts, Alan Lamb, talking about, we've got a first bowler against the upcountry farmers up north in Queensland, and Gower got a first bowler as well. So it all prompted the famous quote from Martin Johnson in the end: England have only got three problems: they can't bat, they can't bowl, and they can't field. So their preparation was pretty ordinary for that series, 86-7, and they won it. So I think maybe Beefy's conveniently forgetting that. But I think he has got a point. I do think you do need to play a game or two, a proper game or two, before you embark on playing in a place like Perth. You go back to Strauss and Andy Flower's preparations for the 2010-11 series, and we'll get Strauss and Graham Swan, who played a big part of that series as well. We'll get them on in a couple of weeks to talk about the preparation that they went through and the memories of their memories of that series in due course. But the preparation was meticulous for that series.
Yeah, and that's very much Andy Flower's way of operating. Brendan McCullum has a very different way of operating, as we know. And just talking about the preparation, something that caught my attention from Rob Key is that in recent series, we have prepared this way, i.e. the way that England are going to prepare for the Ashes, and it's actually worked for them in the first test matches. So I had a look back at this. England won their first test in India, Pakistan, New Zealand, the last three away test matches, the first test of the series. Before that, they won in New Zealand at Mount Maunganui in 2023 and Pakistan in 2022. So the last time they lost the first test in the away series was in the old regime, Brisbane 2021. I think what they've said is that the way we've done it has worked for us. We don't need to be kind of overcooked going into the first test match. Our record is very good. And they feel that there's not much time because of the schedule. I mean, they're in New Zealand at the moment playing these white ball games. They'll use that. They'll use that time in New Zealand to be together as well. So a lot of the players are going to be out there, and then head off to Australia. So that you've got your body attuned to being in that part of the world. So you've got over sort of the jet lag and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point you make, but there's nothing like being in Australia as an Ashes series is emerging and getting used to the sledging and the heat and the light and just the sort of general climate, the culture of Australia, I think takes a little bit of time. If you haven't played in it before, I think it takes, most of these players have now, played in the Big Bash or something like that, or in previous Ashes series. So, they have got a bit of experience in it, but it does still hit you, like in the same way as when you walk out of the airport at Perth and you're hit with this sort of wall of heat. There's a wall of sort of abrasiveness hits you at the same time. And it does take a bit of time, both from a playing and a sort of life living point of view, to get used to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are the two arguments. The one that you put forward and the one that, well, it's not my argument, but it's one that England are putting forward. And if you look back at some of the recent stats, then it suggests that it's something they can deal with and the modern player can deal with. And we're going to find out in Perth on the 21st of November. I think it goes back to Mark Wood's comments. I don't need to bowl too much. I just need to bowl a little bit and then be ready to go.
I understand it from the bowler's point of view, actually. I don't understand it so much for the batsman. Yeah. I mean, look at, again, go back to 2010-11, Strauss and, Trott and Peterson and all the other players in that series, Cook, obviously, they all scored hundreds or more than 100 in that lineup, that warm-up period, that preparation period before the first test in Brisbane. And even then, they started badly. They got bowled out for 260 and Australia took a massive lead. And then England got together and, of course, they produced that amazing 517 for 1, Cook and Trott and Strauss, and drew that game, thank goodness. Because I think in Australia, you do need to start well. England have lost, the first test so often in Brisbane, and it's so difficult to get back from them. So that was an outlier, that test and the 86 test in Brisbane, where they won slightly against the odds, or in the case of 2010-11, drew, when it was looking all, they were looking down the barrel. You've got to start well. But, I mean, I suppose to heed your point, England are starting well at the moment. It's what happens afterwards isn't so good.
Yeah, and that has been their problem. Obviously, they won that first test in India and Hyderabad and then got hammered in the series. The series was interesting for a while, then India just sort of gradually brushed them aside. Last New Zealand tour, they won the first 2 tests and then they won the series and then they were absolutely shellacked in the final test, but then they had won the series. I guess England supporters would be very happy if England had won the Ashes by Melbourne and was shellacked in Sydney. They take that. But yeah, look, this is the way they've done it. And also as well, it's also worth thinking back to, the last time Australia toured the UK, in the last Ashes series, they didn't play, from memory, they didn't play a county side. They played their own internal warm-up games. Some of their players had been playing county cricket. 1 or 2 of them had been playing county cricket in the lead-up to the Ashes. And what happened? Well, they won the first 2 test matches. So I wonder whether the modern player just sees it in a very different way. There was an orthodoxy that you've got to play all this cricket. But England had gone to Australia before and played an awful lot of cricket in the warm-ups back in the day and been hammered. So it doesn't guarantee anything. I mean, I think 74-5, for example, I think they played quite a few warm-up games, didn't they? And they would, I think they actually did quite well. They won a few games in the warm-ups. Yeah. And then when it came to the test series, they were
hit by Lillian Thompson.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's about doing it on the day against the team you're up against, isn't it, when it comes to that first test match?
I take that on board, and I suppose also it is about mental freshness, isn't it? And the thing is, these guys play so much now, as we're talking about. They're playing tomorrow in Christchurch. Not all of them, but quite a few of them that will be involved in the Ashes. Great chance for Jacob Bethell, incidentally, batting at number 3. The team has been announced already, and Jacob Bethell going in at number 3 for England in the T20. So great chance for him to sort of stake a claim for an Ashes spot. They do need, I suppose, just some headspace, really, before the Ashes. So in a way, I sort of get it, but I think I'd prefer one more proper match against a stateside, really. But then they say, well, the statesides that are put out against them are weak, so there's no point. So it's a difficult one to win the argument, really.
So what they've done is they put themselves up against presumably young, hungry Lions players, who got a point to prove. That's the way they've gone. The proof will be when the series gets underway, and you can make your arguments either way. I mean, the thing is, if they do get hammered, you say, well, is it to do with the preparation, or is it just to do with the fact that Australia are better than them? You read the stats out, and Australia are still decent favourites to win the series. It's going to be tough for England either way, I think. But I mean, you do sense that they've got a puncher's chance in this series if everything, if sort of things align. Remember, was it Ted Dexter talk about the planets aligning once or something? It kind of feels like that. All the planets have got to align in the right place. England, they do have some options at their disposal, that pace attack, and they've got some exciting batters, and they're led by Ben Stokes. So yeah,
Ben Stokes, our greatest ever Test cricketer, according to me.
Yeah, and Stuart Broad. I mean, I talk about players, having their say. Botha's had his say. David Warner's talk about, Australia are going to win the Ashes, England are going to probably win the moral victory. That goes back to a Harry Brook comment before the last test of the last series, when he was asked about if England were to win at the Oval, what would that mean? He said it would be a kind of a moral victory. What was the actual quote? I've got it here. He said about Manchester when the rain ruined England's chances of winning. We were dominating the game, and if it had played out, I would like to think we would have won. So if we can win this week, it almost can make it a moral victory. So it almost can make it a moral victory. And so that was kind of like blown up into England won the moral Ashes because they did win that game, and it was 2-2. And of course, there was the moral aspect, inverted commas, of the run out of the stumping of Bairstow at Lord's. I mean, the thing is, there's so much beat up around the Ashes, isn't there? Every sort of word is analysed and amplified. And then Stuart Broad the other day, you expect Stuart to get stuck in, wouldn't you? I mean, he is the man as far as England are concerned. Australia.
Well, he's the alternative to Glenn McGrath, isn't he? And of course, he admired Glenn McGrath from afar when he was young. He certainly wanted to be exactly like Glenn McGrath, and he is, both on and off the field.
Yeah, so he's been saying that this is the worst Australian side since 2000, and it's the best England side since 2000. So if you put those two together, you can see that England have got a chance. It's funny, isn't it? The worst Australian side since 2010-11. It's kind of like, I mean, not much history to go on. I mean, normally when you go to Australia, they say this is the worst England side ever. It's not for the last decade. It's the worst England side ever. It's worse than the worst England side. It's those sort of sledges that come out.
Well, Warner's already said, he said 4-0 to Australia, and England will do well to get nil, he said.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it might well be true, and Stuart words might be true as well. This is an Australian side that is, most of them are 30-somethings now. You wonder how many of them are going to play on afterwards, although players do tend to play on much longer these days. Jimmy Anderson looks as though he's negotiating another contract with Lancashire into his 44th year. So players are fitter, stronger, whatever, more longevity. There's more money in the games. You want to play on longer, but you do wonder what the future is for this Australian side, and how they ultimately will regenerate themselves. So then there is that aspect. They are a 30-something side. England have got some younger players emerging. So you can kind of see this sort of Ted Dexter idea of the planets aligning, but there'll have to be some serious aligning, I think, for England to go there and turn Australia over. But it isn't. I think in previous series I just couldn't see it happening. Not in the last two, anyway. Back in Mitchell Johnson's series, we kind of didn't know what Johnson was going to come up with, and England have just won 3 Ashes series in a row. So you could see them going there and being successful in 13-14. Johnson wrecked that. But the last 2 series, I didn't give England much of a chance. In fact, I thought they'd be hammered in both series, and they were. This time, I don't know. We're going to do our predictions closer to the series, and I've been thinking about it the last few weeks, kind of umming and ahhing.
You need to get out more, You get a life.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true. But I'm going to get a life on the middle of November because I'm heading to Australia to commentate for.
Have you still got your shorts
Test match
on?
special. Yeah, I've still got my shorts on.
Yeah, I've got my shorts on as well. I reckon we might be able to get through the whole of the year without, because if we're in Australia together, we get the whole of the year without having to put a pair of trousers on. That'd be quite good.
Yeah, well, it's still lovely and mild, isn't it? It's October. It's lovely and mild. Yeah, so much going on beneath the surface. There is so much to talk about. We could talk a lot more about the Ashes.
But we're not going to. We're going to take a quick break. So England's first T20 against New Zealand starts tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, 7:15 on TNT Sports and on Discovery Plus as well. But what we're going to do now, just for a few minutes, is talk about our last podcast, which was looking back at our analysis of England's greatest Test players. You, Simon, put into ChatGPT various criteria and came up with 2 lists which evaluated who was England's greatest Test player. And then I did the same, but with my own analysis and kind of various metrics that I used. And we did come up with slightly different answers. You can listen back to the show. It's our last show. It's called England's Greatest. Jack Hobbs came out top in both of your ChatGPT analyses. And I voted Ben Stokes as England's greatest Test cricketer using various metrics, including batting, bowling, fielding, impact, and also captaincy skills as well. And of course, his captaincy skills are very highly rated. But anyway, there's been some good comments. Thank you very much for your comments on YouTube after that episode of our podcast. I'm just going to read a couple here, actually. Lots of views that it stirred up. So Malcolm, FK4RR, says, despite growing up in the 1980s, I've always thought the answer to England's greatest Test player was Hammond. Everything you read suggests he made batting look ridiculously easy and was a great bowler if he could be bothered. Yeah, well, that was certainly true from the sounds of it. Stephen Godsmark says Hutton believed it was Hammond and Wisden had him second of all time. So that's the answer, according to Stephen Godsmark. So Walter Hammond gets 2 votes there. We talked about other countries a bit as well. I suppose what stirred this one up in the first place was the fact that you pointed out that it's harder perhaps to identify England's greatest Test player compared to other countries where there is always a standout. And Matt Garbutt here says, interesting to note that perhaps of all Test nations, there is most debate about England's greatest, as you said. I wonder which country has their greatest player furthest ahead of the rest. I would think Andy Flower for Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. He was a top-class player. Because he played for Zimbabwe, he's not sort of spoken of that much, Andy Flower, but he was a fine player and also a brilliant player in the subcontinent. And Laurie Bunyan makes the point here. He says, one main benchmark a batsman has to achieve is to bat in an Asian country and conquer the spinner. Brian Lara conquered Muralitharan in his own backyard. 83 runs in 3 tests. Check his average against Murley. Do you think Jack Hobbs or even Bradman, 3 question marks, presumably managed that? No, never. Well, the point we made is that, of course, they didn't play in the subcontinent because subcontinental teams didn't play in their day. I mean, it was largely England and South Africa and a little bit of the West Indies, and those other sort of teams are gradually beginning to emerge. So you can only play against what was on offer. And for England players, which was what we looked at specifically, the benchmark, and it has been the benchmark over 150 years, was Australia. So how well did you do against Australia? So look, it's Yak DKD makes the point. I think this is just your opinion. Yes, you're right. It is just our opinion. That's how it works. Although it was Chat GPT as well, because my daughter said to me, "Who is the greatest England cricketer?" And I said, I'm not sure. That's a really good question. So that's where it came from. So I wasn't sure. So I mean, I don't know necessarily who's England's greatest cricketer. You can make a case out for the people that we talked about. You were the one that were sort of in the firing line, yours, because you were asked to come up with your top 10 in your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we actually also put, for the other countries, we put that into Chat GPT as well. And I felt that was easier. That was an easier thing to do. There were some people said that Imran Khan was a better cricketer than Wasim Akram, and you can definitely argue that. But what's great is, of course, people do have their opinions, and yes, Yak, it is just our opinion. But he says I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. He says you left out Gooch. This is presumably you, Yoz, because I didn't. I just put it into Chat GPT. You left out Gooch, but put Root so high. He says Root didn't bat against Australia when he was needed most. Well, he did bat against Australia when he was needed most, but perhaps he didn't have the success, is what you mean. West Indies couldn't get Gooch out early notice. Well, Gooch, he was a fine player, wasn't he? And he played some fantastic innings. In fact, you could argue he played one of England's greatest ever innings against West Indies, Headingley, when he scored a high proportion of runs on a tricky pitch against a really high-class West Indies attack.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I evaluated that innings. When Stokes played his innings against Australia in 2019 at Headingley, 135, and you commentated, in fact, at the start of our show, your commentary of his winning shot is there. When he produced that innings, I actually used my same sort of metrics to evaluate which innings are the greatest that has been played by an England batter. Gooch's 154, I think it was, at Headingley was up there, as was Kevin Peterson's 180 in Mumbai. But Stokes came out top, interestingly, 135 against Australia, when, of course, they had that amazing last wicket stand with Jack Leach. And I evaluated that innings as the best one that had ever been played by an England batter. But Gooch was so close with that innings against West Indies. And it was very hard to not have him in my top 10. I mean, I felt bad in a way not having him in. And Alistair Cook wasn't in either. Don't ask me to try and I just felt there were other players who perhaps, the trouble is, he had Hammond in there, we had Hutton in there, or I did. The trouble is, you didn't see those people play. So it's difficult in a way to be fair to either. I did see Gooch play, and I played against him, and I hated bowling to him. It was just impossible to bowl at, except when Ian Botham had him locked in his wine cellar for a few hours, and then he was useless the next day. Gooch was an immense cricketer who I felt bad leaving out, but I suppose the records of Hutton and Hammond in particular, averaging close to 60 in Test cricket, when Gooch averaged about 43, just in a way gave them more credibility, I suppose. But I mean, I'm sorry, Graham. Sorry, Gucci. You should have been in, really.
Yoz, you keep knocking something, so it's clicking quite a lot on your. When it's your headphones, you need to be. You get very enthusiastic,
Sorry.
and there's quite a lot of clicking. Just to let you know when you listen back to it.
So I'll just give you another one, actually. I'll give you another one here.
Again, you did something there that clicked.
Sorry, I just knocked
click,
it, yeah.
and again.
Well, I'm not moving. I'm
It must be to do with your head.
Vantherman says Botham by a country mile. Botham took 27 fifers, 4 10-wicket matches, 14 hundreds, first cricketer in history to do the double in a test match, scoring 100, then taking 10 wickets in the match. On 5 occasions, Botham scored 100 and took 5 wickets in an innings, etc., etc. So, very good argument there. And Botham was my number 2, actually. I found it hard to separate him and W.G. Grace and Ben Stokes with my faulty metrics. But if I had to choose one player to pick to, play for my life, I probably would choose Botham, actually.
Well, he was a fabulous cricketer. I mean, hard to say much more than that, really. And this is the whole point, is that the debate is there. You had him very high up. And ChatGPT, doing all this analysis, kind of like deep dive analysis into, and what we looked at was with those chat GPT prompts, one of the people said, I'd like to know what your sort of criteria was. I would like to know what your prompts were. Well, I think we did mention those at the time. It was things like obviously stats, and both scores very high for that. It was also things like home and away. It was also about the quality of the opposition as well. How well did he do against the best sides of the day? And I think the point we made there that might just have dragged him down a bit on ChatGPT. This was the paid version, by the way, so kind of like a bit more sophisticated with more data, was against the West Indies. He didn't have a great deal of success. You go back to some of those old YouTube videos. I was actually watching it the other day. I just suddenly just alighted onto it, just looking back at some old Ashes series. And I just watched that mesmeric innings again at Old Trafford on that grey Saturday when England could barely get the ball off the square. And then Both came in the afternoon and just smashed it everywhere and was hooking Lily off his nose into the stand at fine leg. And the best shot of all, I think, was a pull through
off Alderman. Terry Alderman.
Yeah, through mid-wicket.
He treated it like an off-spinner. It was like an off-spinner, wasn't it? Terry Alderman was a decent bowler. He got over 200 test wickets, bowling 83, 84 miles an hour. And he just sort of deposited him over deep mid-wicket, didn't he? Pull shot, like a spinner.
Hold on, do that again. Do that again, Yods. You're getting all excited and knocking the wires again.
He got right back on his stumps as if Alderman was an off-spinner and pulled him miles over mid-wicket as if it was an off-spinner bowling a long hop.
Look, everybody, it's fantastic that you engaged on YouTube. It's great to hear your comments. And yeah, it is an opinion, and you can't be definitive about these things. And people will talk about these type of things forever and ever. Who was the greatest? What should be your criteria? And as more teams have come into the Test arena, then you've got different sorts of challenges, haven't you, as well? That's the other point. The players of yesteryear, GPT rated Jack Hobbs the highest. He didn't have that test against spin in the subcontinent, say, that players will have these days, and you can't criticise him for that. It's just how it was. I mean, he did score close on 200 first-class hundreds. You said to me, who would you like? I said to you, actually, who would you like to take into your Test match? You could pick one of those England players, and you went for Ian Botham. I think I might be tempted to go for Jack Hobbs, just because you just hope.
Well, that's a boring answer. That's just what ChatGPT told you.
You'd like to take all of them in, wouldn't you? Really? Let's face it. You'd like to put together that whole team.
You're one of those people at school who just sort of nodded and winked and did everything the teacher asked you to.
No.
Sometimes.
No, sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. It depends whether I thought they were telling me sensible things or not. I evaluated the evidence, Yols, and then
I bet you were a goody-goody, weren't you? I bet you were a goody-goody at school, weren't you?
Well, I did. I didn't like school. I didn't like the school that I went to, and I was talking to. I said, I really hated it. I know. Let's not go into that now. We're gonna have a bit of therapy, but Miles Jupp said to me once. He just said, "Well, why didn't you just steal a tractor then?" And I thought, "What? Yeah, why didn't I? Why didn't I? I hated it. And what a great way of that would have been of escaping. Just steal a tractor and get expelled. Fantastic. I'm not sure it would have gone down very well with my parents, but it would have been a great way of escaping. Yeah, perhaps I should have stolen a tractor, Yols, but I didn't."
Here's an exclusive. I actually did get points on a licence before I had a licence. I borrowed my dad's car when I was underage and bumped into another car. This is a long time ago. So I actually had to go to court and got some penalty points on a licence which I didn't have.
Yeah, we could call this podcast Chalk and Cheese, Yols, couldn't we? Because at least I would have turned up on time for a Lord's final, unlike you. Anyway, we should stop.
We should go, yeah, because you've got to get ready for tomorrow's first T20. It's on TNT Sports and Discovery Plus, starting 7:15 a.m. Hope you enjoy it. And thanks for listening. We'll be back to review the T20 series later next week.
Thanks so much for listening. Goodbye for now.